Welcome to the in-between. We're back at Knott's Berry Farm, where as you can see, they're getting ready for a very Merry Christmas. Halloween Haunt, aka Knott's Scary Farm, is over, but although the marquee up here may say Merry Christmas, Knott's Merry Farm has yet to begin. It's seasonal limbo. It's a very rare thing to come through those old school turnstiles and stand here in front of the windmill and not see any sort of holiday decorations, but here we are. We have full sort of splashing water tower and old mill shack visibility. One of the weirdest times of the year at theme parks, right? When they're between the holidays. And there's only this special couple of weeks where they're trying to redecorate everything, get prepared for the Yuletide for Santa Claus. Where you're still feeling the Halloween hangover here in Southern California. You still have warm weather. I mean, by most people's definition, it feels absolutely nothing like Christmas time, and yet Christmas decorations are starting to go up. I always feel like you're just sort of waiting. It's the most unusual season of the year, and it happens to coincide with what's been one of the most unusual seasons in my entire life, but we'll get to that later. First, look at this. Merry Christmas may have been over the gate, and there may be Christmas wreaths in here. But look at that. There's still Halloween hoodies as well. Ghostly lanterns are still lining the shelves. Love coming through the main entrance in towards Ghost Town over here because there's a couple of historical gems, as it were, pun very much intended, with the geode shop right here. One is the remains of old Cordelia Knott's. That's Mrs. Knott's original wisteria vines right here. One of the old entrances to Ghost Town was a wisteria-covered walkway, just like this. If you'd come down this way and enter here into Knott's Berry Farm, we're talking way back in the 1940s and 50s, and yet a little piece of that old wisteria vine still remains right here. The other thing is the geode shop itself. For 35 years, from 1951 to 1986, this was the portrait studio at Knott's Berry Farm, run by the artist, more importantly, sculptor Claude Bell and his family. Claude Bell is the guy that used to sculpt all those seldom seen slims, those Knott's Berry Farm cowboys with their mules. You can still see one at Calico Ghost Town today. He also famously handmade those giant dinosaurs you see in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, the Cabazon dinosaurs, and ran a restaurant next door to it for years and years. But the basis of all that artistic success, it all started here at Knott's Berry Farm in that portrait gallery. He'd often have his family painting the portraits, and he'd be out here sculpting some of those seldom seen slims and cowboys and Indians. Claude and his portrait studio are long gone now, but there's something inside I always like to stop and appreciate. A piece of Claude Bell's original sculpted artwork remains in the geode shop where his portrait studio once was. Just have to swing a left inside the front door, pass by all the dinosaur eggs and the geodes and gems, to the old Claude Bell sculpted fireplace here. And above the mantle, there he is, Claude Bell's portrait of Mark Twain. As you know, I'm a big Mark Twain fan. Also a big fan of Knott's Berry Farm history. Pun, once again, very much intended. And look at this. There's a hidden Mickey in here, because that right there is a geode piece or slice of gem, whatever you call that, signed by Brett Iwan, the voice of Mickey Mouse. Friend of the show, friend of mine, and friend of Knott's Berry Farm because he once worked here when he was already voicing Mickey Mouse, by the way, running the trains at Knott's Berry Farm. And once we got to drive one of those steam trains together. Now, I've had some pretty serious health problems that I'll refer to later on, but that basically prevented me from coming back and enjoying Knott's Scary Farm as much as I would have wanted to this season. In fact, I haven't been back here since the opening night of Knott's Scary Farm. I just physically couldn't handle being out here flinching at all the crazy haunts, because I just physically was not capable of handling all the haunt monsters popping out at me and walking around all night, all that kind of stuff. So I've been waiting with bated breath for this perfect opportunity to cruise down to Knott's Berry Farm in the in-between, when things have chilled out a little bit and we have a couple of almost normal days out here, where people are back to panning for gold, listening to banjo music, riding roller coasters, without the screaming in terror or the little vendor booths for Knott's Berry Farm, which should be popping up here pretty much any day now. I love theme parks and I love the seasonal activities and special events. To be honest with you, I prefer my theme parks in the nude. I prefer them to be just the way they're supposed to be on a day-to-day basis. I love this right over here. These old adobe walls, handmade on the farm, are all that's left of Knott's Berry Farm's old original on-property firehouse. The Buena Park Fire Department had an engine right inside of this low adobe building. I guess it wasn't up to code, so they sort of half demolished it here and left the ruins since they're so on theme. I guess, honestly, the advent of fire sprinklers on the roofs here probably did away with the need for the inside of Ghost Town Fire Department. But of course, they also built a modern fire station across the street, which ironically burned down not that many years ago. You might be asking yourself, how does a fire station burn down? Well, we were all asking the same question. All I could ever think of when I ask myself that question is that King of the Hill episode where Dale and Boomhauer and Hank and Bill all burned down the fire department. Hello, look at this. Speaking of Bill, we got Whiskey Bill or Whiskey Jim. Both are sort of historic names. And Handsome Brady.
This guy hadn't been here in so long, I thought we finally got rid of him.
Yeah, nothing good ever happens in this world, I tell you, or nothing good lasts anyways.
Well, like they're always jawing, nothing gold can stay.
These guys are always insulting me, but they've never insulted me so poetically. Anyways, I have returned to Knott's Berry Farm, and it's a glorious, beautiful sight. Any day now, like I said, there will be booths in front of all these little Peekins, all the little ghost town buildings. It's been one of the best and most important changes at Knott's Berry Farm, that the Peekins have actually kind of been restored to their somewhat original glory. Like, look there, you can see Hop Wing Lee in there doing the laundry. He's no longer turning his back towards us. Peekins are always one of my favorite things, even as a child. It's nice to see tradition coming back to the entertainment industry as a whole, and especially the theme park branch of the entertainment industry. And speaking of traditions, old and new, for a lot of people, one of the newest and coolest traditions at Knott's Berry Farm is to come around the side of the old blacksmiths and check out the coolest brand in the old West. The amount of people who tag me in their pictures of this mark from the branding iron continues to utterly astonish me. I came here and got that branding iron done by Ken the Blacksmith, Rusty Gun and Son. They made that for me along with the help of another metal worker here named Randy. I still have the branding iron. And look at this, they always test them on the walls of the blacksmith's office. Why did I just say the forge? On the walls of the forge. So for at least the short term, I've become a permanent part of Knott's Berry Farm. How freaking sick is that? Still a dream come true. Anyway, as you can tell, I love Ghost Town, especially like I said, when it's in the nude. It's just normal. No Ghost Town Alive going on, no Scary Farm, no Merry Farm, no food festivals, just all the wonderful flavor that made Knott's Berry Farm what it was. Authentic looking old ghost town buildings like this, the sheriff's office, and then inside, the Peekin characters. Look at them, playing one of the longest games of poker in history. We have only 2 of the 4 players. I guess the other 2 are on a bathroom break. But at least there's something. Now, because there's a Calico mine ride here, there's a Calico Square and a Calico Saloon in Ghost Town at Knott's Berry Farm. Over the generations, Ghost Town itself has often been known as Calico, because there's a real silver mining ghost town called Calico in the California desert that Walter Knott actually purchased and restored. A lot of people think that this ghost town was based on Calico or supposed to be another version of Calico, like it's supposed to be a desert mining town. In fact, Ghost Town here is actually supposed to be one of the forgotten towns of 1849 and is modeled after and is supposed to be one of those Northern California ghost towns like Columbia or Jamestown or, Sutter's Mill, Coloma, Bodie, all places we've spent some time, but I'd like to spend a lot more. And originally, it was just simply known as Ghost Town, right? Not to be confused with Calico Ghost Town. Look at this. I love this. There's no soap in the dish anymore, but they have replaced that old dirty towel. Don't flinch at the grime, though. 100 others use this towel, and you're the first one to care. Dude, I love these ancient posters back here in the frames. They're just sort of decaying and falling apart naturally. Such a great detail.
I also love this old Western hose spigot.
All this used to be free back in the day. You'd be able to walk into Ghost Town without paying admission and see a lot of volunteers reenacting old Western scenes and old Western trades. And the focus, the appeal was time traveling back to an easier, slower time. And you just get people just kind of wandering in and out throughout the day, not staying like they do in a modern theme park. But a couple of things led to the original vision of Knott's Berry Farm's demise. Firstly, the hippies, right? With no fence around the place and it being free in the late 60s, people would just sort of hippies would just sort of show up here, with their medicinal cures, their herbal cures, hang out in Ghost Town all day and just never leave. People started to break in at night. So of course they had to put a fence around the place and start charging for admission, which meant, especially competing with Disneyland down the street, you had to start adding other attractions, amusements, rides. And then of course by the 1970s and into the 80s, they thought, nobody wants to slow down and check out candle makers in Ghost Town, right? Now we're competing with Six Flags and things. We need roller coasters, we need extreme rides. Then of course the Knott family sold their park in the late 90s to Cedar Fair, which is like a roller coaster company like another Six Flags, which now, by the way, has merged with Six Flags, so sort of technically we're in a Six Flags park now. And with all of that, you would think that all this charm would have been erased a long time ago, but one of the most impressive things about Knott's Berry Farm and the management and the shepherds who take care of it is that somehow, this century, in the last decade especially, they have been very carefully preserving that old school charm, and in some cases even restoring it so it lasts for future generations, which is exactly what we need. I cannot tell you how nice it is to come out to Ghost Town on a regular day like this. A weekday, always aim for the weekdays and talk to Sad-Eye Joe or listen to the music, look at the Pekins. It's been much needed for me lately and always very therapeutic. Some things about old school Knott's Berry Farm will never return, like the volunteers that used to come out here and reenact scenes from the Old West. In the last couple of decades, California has passed some very weird employment laws that stop people from being able to do that, to be able to volunteer, like senior citizens and stuff, without being insured or being paid. It's all very complicated and political, and I don't really understand it, but from my understanding, you'll probably never see that again. Not at Knott's Berry Farm anyway. But they have been doing amazing stuff like bringing back horses and livestock, donkeys to the livery stable back here on most weekends for you to see. Sometimes pet in the case of the goats. And of course, several years back, they not only restored catawampus back here, but also added for the first time a catawampus baby. So, it looks like catawampus is no longer species extinct, thus ensuring that catawampus will never quite go fully extinct. And the best thing is, there's still so many old school spaces that used to house, sort of historical dioramas and things they could still bring back and cram something new into all these little old school facades, museums, shops, Pekins. There's a lot they could do out here to bring back that old school charm. They've really been doing it. I'm so excited to be here, man. I'm just so happy to look around again. Look up here. Other than what was over the gate, the main entrance, here's our first clue that Merry Farm is indeed on its way. Look at the little lanterns up here that will light up during all the Christmas glowing and snowfall. I'm sure there might be some other signs we see along the way of our impending Christmas destiny. But at the moment, man, I'm just happy to be here. It's funny because I always did think of this as like a desert ghost town when I was a kid. I didn't have any context. I was always shouting out Calico. But once you know it's meant to be sort of a facsimile of like gold country ghost towns in Northern California, you start to see that everywhere. It wasn't all purely Northern California inspired though, because in addition to copying buildings from Weaverville, Bodie, all kinds of California ghost towns, they also drew a lot of inspiration from the early Spanish architecture here, like the ruined mission walls you see, Mexican-American history you would later see manifest in Fiesta Village, and of course, Native American history. Here's a sort of much more modern restroom you can see designed in a sort of Pueblo architecture style. And they still have like a Native American dance stage with performances out here every so often. In fact, this particular area and pathway is known as Indian Trails, and there's a couple of teepees down yonder. But Knott's Berry Farm did actually used to have its own island, Indian Village, with performers of legit and sometimes questionable Native American origin. And then you see over here across from this nice steel beam for a roller coaster, Knott's Berry Farm's old bottle house, inspired by one supposedly from Rhyolite, Nevada, and then behind it some of Paul von Kleben's greatest work. This used to be the old stagecoach office where you'd buy your tickets there, and you can see some cactus sprouting on the roof. So eventually it was expanded to include bits and pieces from every type of ghost town in the West, even replicating buildings from as far away as Southwest Texas. Look at that Judge Roy Bean's Jersey Lily Saloon. Of course, no old Western town would be complete without its railroads, so the Ghost Town and Calico Railway was added in the 1950s so that authentic 1880s steam locomotives could pull right in to the fabulous Calico Square here at Knott's Berry Farm, where, look at this, the stage is set literally for the Knott's Berry Farm gargantuan fake Christmas tree to appear very shortly. It's just gorgeous out here today. Nice to see the Calico Mine Ride operating there in the back. Oh, I see some logs coming down on the log ride back there, so you know the Timber Mountain's still chugging away. It's all perfect, and I appreciate it so much more than I normally would because of everything else that's been going on with me. Now, I've done a lot of history videos here, many documentaries, then and now, sort of time travel videos. Ooh, and speaking of history, hold that thought. Look at this window display right here. See that?
The sign says rare old bottles of the 49er days.
See what I'm saying about it meant to be a 49er time? Anyway, this wasn't meant to be one of our history videos. I didn't come down here with history in mind, but once I walk into Knott's Berry Farm, can't help but have history on my mind, so you'll have to forgive the sort of stream of consciousness history talk that's been going on, but boy, it feels good to focus on something but what's been going on with me lately. Let me tell you. Oh no! We've got a hoodie down! Oh, it's perfect, because you need to cover up, ma'am. There you go. Put on something decent. It's cold out here. Winter is coming. Just ask Sean Bean. I don't know if you've noticed this, but I've actually been AWOL for quite a while. Missing in action. Disappeared. Especially since all the crazy events of the 40th anniversary of Back to the Future. I got to drive a time machine. We went back to the filming location with some of my best friends, including Adam the Woo. Basically, since then, I've mostly been trying to physically recover from all that activity. I still got some health stuff going on. And if you were able to listen to the last Patreon podcast, or most recent as of me filming this, I explained some of the issues I've had for years, decades, with my guts, and that I've been bleeding from the inside for well over a year now, and sort of profusely for the past couple months. Yeah, I know that's gross and weird. I won't go into more detail here. If you want to know more about that, you can always go hunt up that podcast. But I have met now with the surgeon 2 days ago. I had the most painful and humiliating and horrible examination of my entire life. The less said, the better. I will have to have surgery, and at least I now know it'll be after the holidays, so there's your little update for it. I don't want to harp too much on that at the moment, especially since I'm very distracted over here by the Lucky Cuss Mine engine house. An engine house would be where they literally have the steam and later diesel engines that would pull the winches and levers and wires that would raise and lower the buckets in the lift for the men in the mine. So there's your mine right there in Ghost Town. But the Lucky Cuss Engine Mine house is usually playing audio in there that is not on right now, unfortunately. Maybe the tape broke or something like that. But look at these signs on the Lucky Cuss Mine Engine House. You've got two originals here. This one, and especially this one, yonder. And the way you can always tell an old school original Knott family era Knott's Berry Farm sign is the raised lettering on the signs. You can actually see this lettering here is raised up. That's because in real ghost towns, the paint on wooden tombstones or wooden signs would stop sand and wind from eroding that portion of the sign. It would become raised up a little bit. So Walter Knott and his team of artists, people like Paul Von Kleben, etc., his woodworkers, all the early guys that worked on Knott's Berry Farm, when they would work on these signs, they would always do them that old traditional way. They'd sandblast the signs so that they were raised up. Now, I'm happy to see that some of these signs are being replaced and returned here instead of just dry rotting and rotting away, but they're all done in this like flat style. They're putting thick paint on just sort of flat plywood boards. They're not really aged the right way. And I volunteered once to who I thought was in charge of this at Knott's Berry Farm to do the signs for free, to like redo them in the old school traditional way, especially the ones that are kind of disappearing, dry rotting, fading into literally into the bushes sometimes. I was very strongly rebuked for even suggesting that there was anything wrong with the signs. Just in case anybody ever sees this that has any power, I still volunteer for free to replace all the signs, one by one, even if it takes me years, authentically with wood, aged the right way. I'm happy to see actually over here, speaking of restoration, see, somebody is trying to do God's work, because all these cactus bushes have been trimmed back now. You can see the old barbed wire display. Look at this, is barbed wire used in the early days of the West for fences, right? The old barbed wire display has been fixed up, it's sticking back up out of the ground, and they finally have replaced the sign. It's just not done the old school way, right? So I'm glad you can see this stuff. I'm glad somebody cares, but I'd like to see those little details come back, and I'm volunteering. I'm just, for the record, I volunteered many times. I know quite a few other woodworkers and restoration type people who would be happy to help replace those beams or work on the signs, you know. It's just hard these days, you know. Hard to find the right contact to talk to and all that stuff, but, you know, at least they are being replaced. So here's like a modern one, not quite done the right way, but at least it's there. And here's the old school one. See how far those letters are raised up off the headstone? That's how you can tell the difference. Maybe one day they'll let me help. Anyways, I have been very sick. The bleeding is profuse enough that the surgeon's assistant 2 days ago told me, like, oh, if you get dizzy or anything, you need to go to the emergency room, you need to have a blood transfusion. So I get that every 3 days. I got it right now, actually. So as you can imagine, because I can't afford going to the emergency room, getting transfusions every 5 minutes, I've just been sort of trying to rest between lots of activity, bleeding a lot internally, and then trying to rest and just recover my strength and not dizziness and all those kinds of things. I also have a heart condition that is not helped by not having a lot of blood pressure, right? Having low blood pressure. I'm leaking out all my pipes. Luckily, I'm not dead yet or in any danger of dying. It's just been very, very, very hard to do much when you have no energy. And it's physically difficult to move around. Now that's nobody's problem but mine, and whining and complaining about it isn't going to help the problem any, or make me feel better for that matter. That is why you have not seen me around that much. And trust me, it's very bad for me. Not just in terms of my spirit. Oh, we might get a whistle. We might get a whistle out of the steam engine. Come on! Let her rip! Give me that whistle!
Give me something better.
Oh, you give me something better? That was better! Heck yes! I love all the train fellas here. See, that was the exact locomotive I got to drive out here, or operate, I should say, with my friend Travis and Brett Iwan and my buddy Tuna Tyler. We got to drive that exact engine, so some of the train guys here know that and are very friendly and cool. That was awesome. What a blowout! Anyway, yeah, so it's been difficult to do stuff to get out much, and not only has that affected my spirit, because the one thing that I enjoy doing, the one thing that gives me any purpose or meaning in my life is doing Randomland and hanging out with all you guys. YouTube does not exactly reward you if you have a week between a video, or even days between videos. Videos get spaced out and you're not constantly uploading. That affects the bottom line, that affects paying bills, medical bills, rent bills, everything. So in every possible way, it's been challenging, it's been depressing, honestly. There have been times where I've absolutely freaked out, just had almost a nervous breakdown, but I've held in there. At least I know after Christmas and New Year's sometime there will be a surgery. I will be better and rise to my full strength, and at least I know I'm still gonna make it to Florida for Christmas. I'm still gonna be able to do some of the traveling I wanted to do. But that's not why I'm feeling good today, folks. The reason I'm feeling good today is because it's also given me a chance to finish up something I've been working on for more than a year, something that actually kind of got inspired by Knott's Berry Farm in a weird roundabout way. Tomorrow, I receive 1,200 bottles of the official Randomland Julio's Jalapeno Hot Sauce. Now, I'm tempted to tell you the full story of how this all came together. I'm not gonna do that, one, because I haven't uploaded in a while, and so I know precious few people will even see this video, and two, I'd like to have the actual hot sauce bottles in my hand before I do that, but they are on a truck on the way to my house. 1,200 bottles of hot sauce, FDA approved, lab tested, all that, everything done in collaboration with my friends over at Music to Your Mouth Hot Sauce. And there's a whole long story there that I will tell you, but basically, long story short, I have been waiting for more than a year since we began this process and created the recipe, and we've done all this testing, and it's been very expensive. Finally have the finished factory made, shelf stable, all natural ingredients actually, and gluten-free. We weren't allowed to put that on the label. There's all these FDA rules. If you put it on a label, you gotta test it. It's a long story, but anyway, it is coming tomorrow as I stand here, and that is gonna be amazing. But with everything good comes something bad lately for me. And we were getting ready, gearing up, like, okay, at least the hot sauce is coming. That's gonna be very, very exciting. But then also during this week, Allie's dad had a heart attack and ended up having triple bypass surgery. And thank God he's all right. He's okay now. He's stable. He might even get to go home in a day or two and recover there. But he did have to have full-on crack your chest open, open heart surgery. So that was a big, crazy thing that went on. It's just like, man, it's just been a whirlwind of chaos and craziness, which is why it feels good to walk around Ghost Town right now with all this. Look, I mean, it's dead. It's really dead over here. It's dead in the in-between. It's just been nice to walk around here and have a little bit of elbow room, get out of the house, get out of my funk a little bit, and think about that sweet, sweet Julio's Jalapeno coming to my house tomorrow, which we will sell on randomland.com. I just have to wait for the bubble wrap and the boxes and the things so that the glass bottles don't break. They're in glass bottles, even no plastic. Anyway, I hope you get a chance to try it in its first batch. Hopefully there will be more batches if this one sells out, and I really hope it does, because trust me, it costs my entire family fortune to make this stuff. But yeah, I wanted to have like a whole launch party and a whole thing, but just every plan's been thrown to the wind. So instead of doing that, we may be heading up to Northern California for Allie to see her dad. She comes from Gold Rush country, actually. So Allie, and she, you know what? Allie is a descendant of Major Stephen Cooper, who was here before 1849, one of the overland pioneers, the first alcalde of Benicia, California. She's got some crazy California pioneer roots, going back to when this was Mexico even.
So we might have to head up there for a couple of days so she can see her dad, you know, give him the old hug. Not too tight, I hope.
And anyway, yeah, there's always a lot going on, it feels like. Speaking of Allie, which is my little wife, for those of you who don't know that already, she can lay claim to this building we've been standing behind this whole time, the Yuba City grist mill, because that's the town she's from. And you see these actual millstones? They were originally imported from France to Yuba City during the gold rush, and because her ancestors were actually there, in fact some of them were bakers and had bakeries, they may have used flour ground up by these very millstones here. How insane is that? The Yuba City grist mill. Now when they built this thing, it worked. And it worked, I think, all the way into the 80s, maybe even into the 90s. Walter Knott himself would get flour ground up here in this grist mill and eat food resulting from it. He lived on the property with his family. There it is right here. If you come inside, you can still see the actual grist mill that should be working here at Knott's Berry Farm. And look at that. It talks all about Yuba City, California, the first flour mill in Yuba City back in the gold rush days. That is insane. Word of the wise, just be careful in the glass blower shop with cameras. They're very wary of people like looking at the actual glass products, but you can go in and take as many pictures of the mill as you want. Speaking of the mill and things restored or broken here at Knott's Berry Farm, before I show you this, I want to say for the record, it is not the fault of the people who work here. Remember, they're owned by a bigger company, and there are budgets, there are salaries to pay, there are all kinds of other priorities than old wooden signs at Knott's Berry Farm, which is exactly why I'm volunteering to replace them for free. There's a lot of things that were built here out of wood to be authentic, traditional, to be educational, historical, that have had to be replaced over the years, specifically the buildings, which can be very expensive. California, you know, building codes and all that stuff. But also a lot of stuff like this, the old water wheel that actually powers that mill in there, and some of the actual connecting tissue pieces that sort of make it work, the mechanical pieces, were also made out of wood or old, now rusted away metal. And you can see here that not only has this like rotted obviously at the bottom and it's tilting, but the wheel is no longer turning, although the water is on, which is very nice to see. See, look, another old faded sign. We could replace that bad boy. You can see a whole chunk of the water wheel has completely rotted. I mean, this is natural. And here's the thing, it totally fits into Ghost Town, seeing like the kind of wrecked ravages and the ruins. But there's only so long you can leave it like this before it's not going to exist at all, much less be able to turn that little flywheel right there. I believe that's what it's called. I'm not a mechanic. That turns the mill inside. So this could all be fixed up and restored. Now, is a major theme park company like Six Flags, Cedar Fair, are they going to prioritize that? No. What I've been thinking about for years in my head is like, is there some way to start like a private, almost like a Knott's Berry Farm historical society where we could raise funds or find the craftsmen to restore this stuff ourselves? Are there laws that prevent that? Is it insurance stuff? Like could somebody navigate that? I just have this instinctive feeling, right, that if the funds were there, the craftsmen were there, the people, the volunteers were there, that maybe it'd be easy to make a pitch. So I hope, I'm not a good organizer at all in any way, shape, or form, but I would hope that maybe somebody out there could start something like that. I just have this feeling that if it was all there ready to go and we could figure out the legality and the insurance and all that kind of stuff, that, you know, maybe it's possible to get stuff like this restored, to go to Six Flags Cedar Fair and say like, hey man, you know, we've got the people, we've got the stuff, it'd be completely free for you. After all, Knott's Berry Farm, I mean, as a farm that Walter Knott worked, is over 100 years old now. Most people agree Ghost Town basically kind of started in 1940, the chicken dinner restaurant in the 1930s for the most. So we are seriously in historic territory when it comes to Southern California. A lot of this stuff is nearly 100 years old, and a lot of it was built with stuff that was even older, that Walter Knott was picking out of real ghost towns or old historic buildings in Southern California. So this is our history here, you know? Like I was saying, there are a lot of people at Knott's Berry Farm that are very passionate about the history. Clearly, you can see they really cleaned this place up. And I have a feeling that there are also some of the corporate overlords, like some of the higher ups, who are also very passionate about Knott's Berry Farm history and stuff, but it's a business. And I think we'll be waiting a long time before the business is able to be, you know, prioritizing stuff like a little bit of wood. So I'm just, you know, again, stream of consciousness, I'm just putting it out there, I'm just thinking out loud, like, is there a way to start a sort of private historical helping? Maybe not. There's stuff like this, right? Just over here next to the graveyard, obscured partly by the buildings that make up the Pony Express roller coaster they added to Knott's Berry Farm years ago. There's this old hearse that's been at Knott's Berry Farm for generations. There's a corpse mannequin inside of that coffin in there, who I believe used to sit up. I could be wrong about that. It's hard to remember these days. It's been obscured from vision for so long. Hard to look down in there now. But that was like something people grew up with here at Knott's Berry Farm. As you can see, the wheels have literally fallen off the thing because that's what happens to anything wood that's exposed to the elements over time. So the old hearse there is literally on its last legs. Now, interestingly enough, in Walter Knott's day, he was so obsessed with history and making accurate wagons and all that kind of stuff. They had a wagon shop on the property where they built most of the wagons you still see, covered wagon replicas and things in museums all across the West, which were made so authentically, most people could not tell the difference between one made here and one made actually in the 1800s. So it's entirely possible that this hearse was actually built at Knott's Berry Farm, although just as likely that it was purchased for Knott's Berry Farm. They no longer have a wagon shop to maintain these type of things, and I'm sure that they're overworked and under budgeted, and a lot of places since the pandemic have had a really hard time finding enough staff and employees. But there are people out there who do restore these type of things. And it's possible, you know, maybe private funds could be raised to get something like this. This is just what I'm talking about, something like this. There may be someone out here who goes, oh, I could totally repair that and volunteer their time, you know, maybe if we could provide the materials. And that way, we don't run the risk of treasures like this disappearing forever. But then on the other hand, like I was saying, that sort of decayed, broken down wagon sitting in a ghost town is pretty authentic to the whole ghost town vibe. So it still works, it's still good. I always worry about things disappearing forever, specifically the stagecoach on the other side of Calico Square. Let's go look at that. Again, I don't want you thinking this is a critique of Knott's Berry Farm or the management or the employees on any level. They have been doing a killer job of restoring the steam engines and some of the signs and props like I was showing you. Like one of the things they added recently on the side of the old red schoolhouse is they added some old school playground features, which I thought was a really cool addition. I mean, they've kind of broken apart a little bit, but that adds to the authenticity, right? They're not meant to actually be played on. Little things like the old barrels or the old outhouse, they've been doing phenomenally. What I'm saying is, you know, they've got to think about new rides, they got to think about new promotions, festivals, all that kind of stuff that actually pays the rent and keeps the lights on, right? So I'm just wondering if there's a way to get private citizens of Calico, like me with the signs, for example, people who would be willing to help restore some of this stuff, if there's a way to get them involved. I don't know who in the world you'd have to talk to for something like that. I definitely couldn't figure it out, but I'm just throwing that out in the breeze just in case, you know, there might be someone out there who's very organized and passionate about history who needs a project. Because Knott's Berry Farm is very special. Unlike Disneyland, this was so organically built out of a family farm and business, and there was all these crazy random people and artists like Paul von Kleben or people like Bud Hurlbut that built the Calico Mine Ride eventually. He started with like little miniature carousels and things. These crazy dreamers who back in the day before corporate board meetings and OSHA regulations and building codes and stuff like that were able to just create the craziest, wildest, most amazing permanent ghost town replica in the world, maybe? Now, there were mock-up ghost towns that they were inspired by, specifically at the World's Fair and other things. We'll get into that some other day. But Ghost Town in Knott's Berry Farm is considered one of America's first permanent theme parks versus like little amusement parks and Mother Goose type of places in the country. It's disputed and contested all the time, but the fact that that's even discussed or disputed at all tells you how historically significant Knott's Berry Farm is, and it was just born in such an organic way. You know, Walt Disney had a heck of a time getting Disneyland started, Knott's Berry Farm being one of the inspirations for Disneyland, by the way. He had a heck of a time. It was very difficult, wasn't exactly smooth sailing, but he did have a movie studio and artists at his command, at his disposal. And although the studio wasn't rolling in dough and had to go massively into debt, both the studio and Walt Disney personally, to get Disneyland built, he was still Walt freaking Disney, right? He could still walk into Bank of America and be taken seriously in a meeting about building his crazy idea about breeding pine trees. Everything that happened to Walter Knott's little berry farm here on Grand Avenue in Buena Park happened completely organically, one thing at a time. A lot of volunteer work, a lot of farm hands just sawing things in their spare time. A lot of the early walk-around characters and people you see in postcards were volunteers. They were old retirees whose parents had crossed the plains and covered wagons. They wanted this new generation of post-World War II kids to understand Western history. Which is why this is here. The old stagecoach, supposedly, nobody knows where this actually came from. Could have been built by Knott's, or could have been an original stagecoach from Anaheim or Buena Park or anywhere. But supposedly this came from Northern California and was once robbed by the notorious Black Bart himself. I was just in Sacramento, California, not too many months ago, telling you about the Wells Fargo chief detective Jim Hume, who inspired a fictional character called Jim Hardy, who was the star of a very popular 50s and 60s TV Western show called Tales of Wells Fargo. So once upon a time, like Wells Fargo's secret detectives and agents and stuff like that were very, very popular business. Jim Hardy's nemesis was Black Bart. He could just not crack that case. The gentleman bandit, the guy that would leave a little bit of poetry, he would rob these things on foot. He'd put sticks in the bushes sometimes facing out and say, "You're surrounded." We'll get into a whole thing about Black Bart one of these days. But if that's true, if this even possibly is a real stagecoach that's even possibly rumored to have been robbed by Black Bart, if that's even remotely true, then this thing deserves to be preserved forever. And again, I'm sure restoring something like this is going to cost you tens, maybe even $100,000 for all I know. Who knows? I'm sure something like this is going to cost a lot more money than Black Bart ever robbed to restore, but I hope somehow, some way, someday it could be done, because you know these things will get to a point where eventually they're not worth restoring. They have to be replaced. Now, I highly, just for the record, highly doubt this was a real stagecoach used in a real robbery. More likely built here on the farm for the purposes of display. It's possible though. But even assuming it was built here at Knott's Berry Farm and just put on display since the 1940s or 50s or whenever it was first dragged out here, that thing is a piece of the collective Southern California imagination. Don't forget that movie stars, Hollywood writers and producers, directors have been coming here since the 40s and were heavily inspired sometimes by what they saw here. Just like Disneyland, there's no way of telling how many things and projects and what kind of people have been inspired by this place and the stories told by the creators that are still trying to keep that old Western dream alive. Let me give you another couple examples of the way Knott's has turned things around in an amazing way the last few years. Once upon a time, not that very long ago, before they built Silver Bullet here, right under what is now sort of the first lift hill, they had on display a replica of Walter and Cordelia Knott's original berry stand that started it all here at Knott's Berry Farm. Now, they claimed it was the original. I don't think anybody believes it was the original, but it was built by the original people and put on display so people could understand where this all came from, right? Keep that American dream in perspective. Start small, working at a little berry stand, and maybe your wildest Wild West dreams could come true one day, right? Good old Walter Knott was very into that sort of thing, so it was important for him to have that on display for visitors. And I myself remember seeing the replica shack right there. Well, that thing was disappeared when they built Silver Bullet. But now, after all these years, when they do things like the Boysenberry Festival or Knott's Berry Farm, they have created a modern replica that's replaced it, that they drag out, that becomes one of the farm stalls, sometimes even selling boysenberries and boysenberry plants. Another thing that used to be located out here along the lake, where, by the way, they used to have a little chapel, and that island I was telling you about that had the original Indian village on it, that has been in other videos I've done here at Knott's. Well, this little walkway connecting Calico Square to Fiesta Village over there has always been sort of known as the El Camino Real. They have these little missions on display, celebrating a little bit of California's Spanish and Mexican period heritage. Again, something that was very important to Walter Knott, that people come here and learn something about California history, about the pioneers, about the things that shaped the world around us. Well, there was a point at which all those mission displays had dry rotted or fallen apart, and eventually were all chucked up into attics above Ghost Town. Some of them were destroyed and lost, and Knott's Berry Farm, a few years back, pretty much out of nowhere, decided to restore the missions one at a time and even replace them that had been lost and put them back on display over here on the El Camino Real. I mean, like anything, as you can see, they're going to need a little ongoing TLC, but it is absolutely amazing that out of nowhere they decided to do that. So clearly there are people here that are very passionate about Knott's Berry Farm's history, and I feel like the company that owns Knott's has done a lot more to work with historians and people like that in the past decade, especially. Obviously, especially for parks that were in California, there were massive sort of financial setbacks caused by the pandemic. I'm no businessman, but from what I understand, they're all still sort of recovering from things like that. You know, back up on maintenance and restoration teams and all kinds of budget cuts that have had to happen, staff shortages, all kinds of problems. But what I see when I come here is that they are still trying their very best to keep the spirit of old Knott's Berry Farm alive, which is something I find absolutely amazing. Anyway, come out to Knott's Berry Farm on a weekday like this, especially in the in-between seasons, you know, and just have a walk around, look in the bushes, look for all these little things like the mine carts that are still hidden here. The old wooden water pipes powering the grist mill. Take a stroll and enjoy the models of the California missions. Or have a seat and take a gander at the old antique merry-go-round that is now itself well over 120 years old. And although it had other stops along the way, it was originally installed in Hershey Park in Pennsylvania in 1902. And it's been in Knott's Berry Farm now since 1987, so almost my entire life. There may not be a little chapel by the lake here anymore, or an island to visit Native America. Mostly the Lake of Reflections is reflecting giant roller coasters now. That's true. There's still so much that is special and charming about Knott's Berry Farm. So much that makes it unique and fun, above and beyond just the obvious stuff. But let's not forget, the roller coasters aren't bad either. I'll tell you what, it feels good to be out here focusing on history and lore rather than focusing on slowly bleeding to death. Even though we haven't even really been out here for all that long so far today, I'm already pretty much reaching my limits of what I'm capable of at the moment. Now, if you could do me a favor, please share this video with your friends, people you think would like it. Share it on social media. That would help me out a lot because these videos are getting a little spaced out at the moment. And without your help, recommending them, giving them a thumbs up, probably even subscribers won't see that I'm posting at the moment. And I do not want people missing the boat on the hot sauce, which, like I said, is coming so soon. I'm receiving the bottles tomorrow, then I'm just waiting for packing materials, and then they'll be available at randomland.com. And like so many other people and things, they were inspired by Knott's Berry Farm. My original idea, the impetus, the seed. Much like Walt Disney sitting on that bench watching his daughters go on the carousel at Griffith Park. Inspired Disneyland, me coming to the brand new Fiesta Village when it reopened just a little while back and checking out some of the new merch and nifty gifties. Inspired the creation of a Randomland Hot Sauce because behind the cantina down here at the Fiesta Mercado, on the reopening night of Fiesta Village, I discovered that in celebration of opening up Fiesta Village once again, Knott's Berry Farm had created their own jalapeno hot sauce just for Fiesta Village and later for Ghost Town that I would now call the second best hot sauce in the world. It would have been the best except for it was just holy fire, gut rot, pain, extreme. The flavor was so good. I like a lot of heat in my hot sauce, but the flavor was also so good. Well, I guess it was a temporary thing because eventually, like right now, I could not find it back here and I had got pretty much addicted to that hot sauce. 100% worth the $20 or whatever I was paying for those little 5-ounce bottles. But not only did it eventually disappear, so I was like, oh my gosh, I need hot sauce. Where am I gonna find hot sauce that's on par with that hot sauce? But I always thought if you could dial down the heat a bit and ramp up the flavor a bit, change the consistency a bit, just add a little bit of this and that, but you could actually create the world's greatest jalapeno hot sauce recipe, just as Knott's inspired it by coming up with that hot sauce in the first place and then having it out of stock. Just as that all happened, I met a guy named Johnny Winton, the owner of Music to Your Mouth Hot Sauce, and hey, I got this crazy idea for a flavor. To make a long story that I will be repeating in very soon, obviously, because I'm gonna have to do a hot sauce specific video when it's finally available on the website. To make the long story short, you know, basically over the past year and 6 months maybe, Johnny took the flavor that was in my imagination and helped me make it a real recipe. First, just a homemade one that my friends and I were enjoying, and now thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars later, and a lot of time later, the real thing is now coming to my doorway tomorrow morning. Took me nearly 30 years and almost my entire family fortune to realize the vision of that day. My God, has it been that long? Things are certainly different around here. This was all farmland as far as the eye could see. Old man Knott owned all of this. Had this crazy idea about breeding boysenberries. And I too have had some crazy ideas in my time. Filming theme parks, making a show at a theme park. Are you insane? Who would do such a thing? You're crazy. And as we've all seen, who's laughing now, huh? There's millions of them. Carved tikis? You're a madman. Who would want tiki masks? Move in with that gal from Northern California. Are you nuts? Well, I feel good. Once again, a crazy dream that everybody told me I was crazy for even thinking about this hot sauce is about to become a reality. Much the way that Walter Knott, who grew up in Pomona, California, in the city, always dreamed of being a farmer and a homesteader and whatnot, finally made his dream a reality and then made new, crazier dreams become a reality. And is still doing the Lord's work, inspiring people like myself to this day. Just think of that, 100 years later. That is absolutely wild. All right, guys, that's about as much time as I could stand on my feet. I just want to say a personal note here that some of you have been following kind of what's going on with me either on Patreon or over on Instagram or whatever. At Justin Scarred, by the way, 2 R's. Remember the extra R. And I want to personally thank you for your kind messages, for your prayers. They appear to be working. I'm still alive. The same goes for the ones that were meant for Allie or for her dad and all this recent stuff. We really appreciate it. Also really appreciate it when you like these videos and share them with your friends. When you are able to snag a sick piece of merch from our sick merch store, which will soon include the hot sauce within a few days here. But a special shout out to those of you who watch these videos, especially all the way to the very end and never miss an episode. And a special shout out to all of our patrons over at Patreon. You're literally keeping us alive in some, I wouldn't call them dark times. I'm still in a good mood. I'm still feeling happy, but some definitely challenging times for me. I guess I really shouldn't complain because I'd rather be the one that's sick or ill or whatever you want to describe it as a million times over than for Allie to ever have to go to the hospital even one more time. So in the scheme of things, trust me, I am feeling pretty grateful to be alive, to be outside today, to be walking around in old Knott's Berry Farm in the old West. I'm very grateful to have you along for the ride in the wagon train today. But that's about all the strength I can muster for one day. There's a lot of bleeding after my procedure the other day, which again we'll probably discuss more on an upcoming Patreon podcast. But until then, my friends, we've done our duty. It's time for me to go home and sleep. Wow, thanks for hanging out with me. See you next time. Oh, by the way, my Knott's Berry Farm friends, my little farmateers or whatever, something weird is going on at Knott's Berry Farm's sister park across the parking lot. They are filming some kind of movie or TV show. By the way, look at this. There's Halloween right there. We got Merry Christmas around the corner, but Halloween still in the back of the shops. Also, Cable Car Kitchen, named because they used to have an actual San Francisco cable car that would run up here in this area. Anyway, across the street they're filming something. They got all the Hollywood production vehicles over there. I can only assume it's being filmed in Soak City because I saw absolutely no evidence of filming in here. I'll check that out when I get back to the car. Oh, no, I was going to take you out to the parking lot, show you where all the trailers and the trucks are. Hold on, I was listening to some music there, some tunes, jamming some tunes. But now I see over here across the street at the Independence Hall side, I can see filming lights back there. Like those giant lights they usually tend to shine through windows. Right in front of Independence Hall. Oh, look, Knott's Berry Farm cats. Knott's Berry Farm cats. Shout out to Adam the Woo, man. Oh, look at that. They're all appearing from nowhere. I just had a great little conversation with the cat lady. It's like the Feed the Bird lady of Knott's Berry Farm's cats. Hello. No, they don't want to be friends. That's okay. We've rescued enough cats for this week. Anyway, they're filming. They're filming something at Independence Hall. National Treasure sequel again, maybe? I don't know. That's at Independence Hall. What could be at Independence Hall? Anyway, there you go. They're filming something at Knott's Berry Farm. Don't know what. Don't know when. We'll see it. Or if we'll see it. Who knows? Could be a training video. I don't know. But there were some big old star wagons from Hollywood here, so this could be kind of interesting.